Well, good morning, church. Good to see you guys. My name is Bobby. I'm one of the pastors here at the Ridge. If you have a Bible with you, go ahead and grab that and open it up to Matthew chapter 28. We will get there together in just a few moments. If you don't have a Bible with you, we'll have it on the screen back here behind me, or if you have the YouVersion Bible app, it's in the App Store there. It's a free download, great Bible resource that you can use. If you click on More and then Events, you'll get Ridge Church to pop up, and you can follow along with all of today's notes right there. So a couple of quick things before we dive into today's message really quickly. First of all, we have coming up here really soon, next Saturday actually, a women's hike. So our women's ministry is taking a hike. I like to say that. It's kind of fun. Take a hike, women, take a hike. I'm just kidding. We love you guys. But they are taking a hike, and they're going to meet over at the UT Arboretum on Saturday at 10 a.m. For a hike. And so if you are interested in that and want to go to that, you can just show up over there. Or you can, if you want more information about it, grab that Connect card that Wesley was talking about. Either snap the QR code. There's one right there on your seat in front of you somewhere, or use the physical card here and drop it in one of these silver boxes on your way out and just be like, hey, I'd like more information about that, or I'd like to go. Let them know that I'm coming, kind of deal, and we'll make sure that we get that information over to them. So a lot of fun for that. And then the other thing is just a side note really quickly. Today is our 14th birthday as a church, and so pretty cool, pretty neat. It's pretty awesome. If we were not born as a church, you would not be here. So not here, but you know what I mean. Like in this room, you probably wouldn't be here. But we're excited about that. That's a really cool thing. 14 years. 14 years is pretty cool. They didn't think we'd make it one, and so here we are, all by the grace of God, obviously. So really excited about that. We typically don't make a big deal about those things, and we might do something next year for 15 or 20, 25, something like that. I don't know, but it's just always fun just to bring it up really quickly. But Matthew chapter 28. So Jesus. Last week, we celebrated the resurrection, and it's always odd, like I always find it a little bit odd when we have Easter services, and it's awesome, it's packed, you can't even get into the place. Like literally, our 11 o'clock service in here, you could not fit a small child in this room. In our 11 o'clock service last week, and almost the same in here for this service as well. Good Friday sunrise service, like it's just this big, huge deal, and we celebrate that, and that's so fun and amazing, and the energy is so awesome and great. And then you do the next Sunday, and it's like, not the same, a little different, and it feels different. And I get it. You get all this energy, you get everything. Like it's just, it feels different, but it's not different. It's not different at all. Easter Sunday is a Sunday that we choose to mark to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. But I love what Wesley said a few minutes ago. The tomb is still empty today. It will still be empty in November. It will still be empty in January. It does not matter what Sunday it is. The tomb is still empty. It doesn't matter what day it is, and every day. It doesn't matter if it's a Tuesday, it doesn't matter if it's a Thursday, that tomb is still empty. And the celebration of that, the thought of that, the weightiness of that, I think sometimes we miss, and we only really truly feel the weight of it and truly marvel at it on Easter Sunday. When it should be, if you are a Christ follower, it should be every day. It should be every day. And so the resurrection happened. It happened. We talked about that last week. The tomb is empty. So what happened next? I think the thing that happened next is as the disciples gathered together after the resurrection, after they saw Jesus later that day, after they had heard of the resurrection and Jesus appeared to them in the upper room, in my mind, they all just kind of sat around and probably looked at each other and just went, now what? Now what? one of the disciples, probably, right? Like that. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but you have to think that there's a part of them that they just kind of looked at each other and was like, well, what do we do now? I mean, we've spent the last 3 years of our lives walking with Jesus, Him teaching us, Him showing us experiencing everything that we had experienced, and then we saw Him murdered on a cross, and now we're pretty sure, we think, I mean, it feels pretty real to us, that He walked out of that tomb, that He's not in that tomb any longer. The grave is empty. He resurrected just like He said He would. And so now what do we do? So what happened after the resurrection? Well, I mean, we read the Gospels, we can see what happened. It says that He appeared to the disciples. Later that afternoon, later that day or evening, it says that He appeared to the disciples in the upper room where they had the what we call the Last Supper, communion together with one another. And Jesus appeared to them there, but when He appeared to them there, Thomas somehow missed church that day. Thomas didn't go to church. He stayed at home. Like he just wasn't there, right? And so he wasn't part of the group. There was 10 of them gathered together, maybe a few others that were not named, but 10 or so of them gathered together that Jesus appeared to, except for Thomas. We don't know where Thomas was. But they tell Thomas, right? And Thomas is like, I don't believe you. You guys are lying. You're telling stories. Like, I don't believe you. In fact, what Thomas actually says is he says, I will not believe you unless I'm able to touch the wounds on Him. Put my holes or my fingers in the wounds of His hands. And so Jesus is like, that's pretty good. We'll show Him, right? And so like a week later, He shows back up and He appears to the other 10 and now also to Thomas, and that's a whole thing, right? We know of a time where after the resurrection that Jesus walked along with a couple of disciples on the road to Emmaus, right? He walked along this 7-mile walk. He walked along with them, and like they were having this discussion, having this talk, except these guys didn't even know it was Jesus until, like the end of the walk together, and it says, didn't our hearts burn within us when we recognize that it was Jesus? And we know that later on, Jesus appears to the disciples. They still don't know what to do yet. They still are just kind of like, we don't know what to do. Like, we got to put all this together. We're processing. We still haven't figured all this out. And so Jesus makes them breakfast on the beach. It's the first ever men's breakfast, right? They get together and they have a breakfast together. And then Jesus tells Peter, actually he asks Peter, he says, Peter, do you love me? Ask him 3 times, do you love me? And it's almost as if, it's probably conjecture, but that Jesus is asking Peter 3 times because what did Peter do prior to that? He denied Him 3 times. You know this man. No, I don't. Yeah, you do. You know this man. No, never seen him. You know this man. Never heard of him. Get away from me. Peter, do you love me? You know I love you. Peter, do you love me? I love you. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord. And then Paul later on in Corinthians says that he appeared to 500 people. Over 500 people. There are appearances of Jesus. And all of this happens in about a 43-day period after the resurrection. For about 43 days. After the resurrection, Jesus appeared over and over and over and over and over and over and over again to others to show that, in fact, He did not die on that, or He did die on that cross, but He was resurrected from the grave. Walked out of the tomb just like He said He would, just like it was promised that He would. And so why it's fun to think or ask, right? Like why did Jesus stick around for 43 days? I think sometimes in our minds we think that Jesus walked out of the tomb, and when He walked out of the tomb, He appeared to the disciples once, and then He ascended to heaven. Gives the Great Commission, Acts chapter 1:8 happens, and then he just ascends to heaven. But it didn't happen that way. It was for 43 days, about 43 days, give or take a day or two. But why? And I think why is that in some of these encounters, some of these resurrection appearances that you have, Jesus is sort of just tying up some unfinished business. He's got some things that he needs to say. He's got some instructions that he needs to give. He's got some things that he needs to remind his disciples, his followers, to do. In fact, what he's going to do, and what we're going to read about here, is he's actually going to give them a mission. He's going to give them something that, hey, this is the thing. Like, I'm leaving. I'm going to the Father, but I'm not really leaving you. And he'll explain that a little later on. We'll talk more about that next week. But he says, I'm not really leaving you. In fact, I'm going to be with you, but I am physically ascending to the Father. But the mission is not over. Just because I'm not walking with you right here, right now, physically in a physical body, does not mean that the mission is over. In fact, it is just beginning. And this is what he says to them. Let's look at it together. Matthew chapter 28, verse 16. He says this, the 11 disciples, so we know who that is, right? John and Peter and Thomas and all of these guys. Matthew, they're together, right? The 11 disciples traveled to Galilee. He's like, I thought there were 12. There was 12. Judas, we talked about last week, Judas hung himself after betraying Jesus. The 11 disciples traveled to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshiped, but some doubted. We'll talk about that in a second. Jesus came near and said to them, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the very end of the age. Now, I love that the scriptures point out that as Matthew is actually writing his account of what happened, what he saw, what he experienced, and so this is coming from the eyes of Matthew, one of his 11 disciples who's with Jesus, writes down that some of the 11, we don't know which ones, like it's easy to go, well, it was probably still Thomas. He just still hadn't gotten over that whole thing yet. But I don't think it was actually Thomas. It might have been some of the others. We just don't know which ones. But it says some of them doubted. And I always find that a little bit funny when you think about it, because it's like, at what point in this whole thing, at this point, are you doubting, right? Like, after everything that you've seen, like, what is it that you are actually doubting? But Jesus understands that. It says some doubted, and so it's as if Jesus actually speaks into their doubts with the very first thing that he says to them. And the very first thing that he says to them is he says this. He says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. And so I think this is Jesus' response to the doubters. Jesus is saying he's not just our personal Lord, but he is universal Lord. And that's important. He has authority, nature and nations, disease and demons over our lives, sin and death. This is his authority. He has authority over all of these things. And what does the word authority mean? It means that he rules all of them. He is the one who commands all of these things. And so when some of these disciples are saying, I'm not real sure, Jesus is like, you're going to be sure one way or the other. Because all authority has been given to me up here and down here, in heaven and on earth. And his authority, if anything else, his authority was proven in the resurrection. I mean, the man predicted his own death. He didn't just predict it. I mean, he knew it. Right? I mean, he gave the details of it and of the resurrection. And so anybody who does that, anybody who is able to do that, I would say, yeah, I believe you. You have all authority. All authority has been given to you. And in the resurrection, Jesus shows He shows his supremacy in all things and his ultimate rule and reign over the universe that he created. That he created. And so then, what does he do next? Then he gives them the mission statement. You're like, oh yeah, I've heard this. Live, laugh, love. I saw that at Hobby Lobby, right? That's the mission, right? You see that more on pictures than you see the Great Commission sometimes, right? Live, laugh, love. That's it. That's what we're all supposed to do. Not exactly, although that's fun. But he gives them the mission. And we're going to just dissect it here for just a second. So 3 things. I want to give you 3 things here really quickly this morning. The command of the mission, the context of the mission, and the covenant of the mission. The command, the context, and the covenant. So if you need to write things down ahead of time, I'm going to try to do better at kind of giving you the points up front so you know where we're going. All right? So the command of the mission. This is what he says. He says, go. Go. It's pretty easy, right? He says, go. And so if you are a Christ follower, you've been saved, you are a Christian, you've been walking for Jesus. Let's say you've been walking for Jesus for a while, or maybe not even that long. You have probably heard this: go and make disciples. You've probably heard that. Maybe you get that. Maybe you understand it. Maybe you don't. But I think there are 3 types of people when it comes to the Great Commission. I think there are 3 types of people probably in this room this morning. Will be a little later today. And the first group is those that know to go. You know to go. When the scriptures say go, like you get that, you understand that, you know that, and to the best of your imperfect, let me make sure that I emphasize the word imperfect, because you're not always going to get it right. Sometimes you're going to mess it up. It's not always going to work out the way that you want to. Sometimes you just don't do it when you know that you should, kind of thing. So it's an imperfect ability, right? To go. You're doing it, you're trying, you believe Jesus at his word. Jesus said, go and make disciples, and you're like, that's it, I know I got to do that. I know I'm supposed to do that. I'm going to try to do that. I know I ain't always going to get it right. I know I ain't always going to be perfect, but I'm going to do it. There's those of us, right? And then there are those who are, what I would say, unaware. You're not sure. Not sure about Jesus. Not even really sure if you believe what is written in the scriptures. You're not really even sure if you believe the whole resurrection thing. Maybe you're not even sure if there's like a God even. But you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure it out. You've never been taught this. You never even heard this. In fact, maybe, and you're just hearing this for the first time. And listen, for those of you who've been walking with Jesus for a long, long time, I know in your mind you're like, there's no way nobody's ever heard this. No way nobody's ever heard this. And listen, I am here to tell you, and maybe even here this morning, later today, at some point, it happens all the time. You would be so surprised how it happens all the time, of the stories I hear from people who walk through these doors who go, I have never in my life set foot inside of a church. Ever. Not for a wedding, not for a funeral, not for church, not for a vacation Bible school. My parents didn't take me as a kid. My grandma didn't take, never in my life have I ever walked into a church. And if that shocks you, open your eyes. Because it's happening. It's happening. We're in the middle of it. We are in what we call post-Christian. Post-Christian. Like, well, but we live in a Christian nation. No, we don't. No, we don't. It's not a Christian. There are more people who are not Christians in this nation than who are. It ain't the 60s anymore. It ain't happening. So we got to open our eyes to that. We got to see that. And so there are some of us who may just be in that spot in this room right now. Then I think there are some of us, we know to go. We've heard it. We know it by heart. If somebody said, hey, tell me what the Great Commission is, you could spout it out. You could say it. You would say that you believe the Bible, you're a Christ follower. But this, you believe everything in the Bible, or you would say you believe everything in the Bible, but this. So I believe the Bible. I believe everything in it. I believe should take it at its word. How do you engage into the Great Commission? The great what? The Great Commission. Oh, the great option? It's an option, right? Like you got to be a pastor to do the Great Commission. No. Nope. And so at best, you believe falsely that maybe that the Great Commission it's only for people with the word pastor in front of their name, or ministry leader, or whatever. But actually, it's Christ follower. Because if you're a Christ follower, you're a disciple of Jesus. You are a follower. A disciple means follower, one who learns from, of Jesus. Right? And so we don't have any good reasons. It's like, but I don't know how. That's great, because now you're in trouble because you're in this room this morning and we're going to talk about it, and now we don't have any excuses, right? So if you want off the hook, now would be probably a good time to hit up Panera. It's open. If you're just thinking about going to the bathroom, now would not be a good time, okay? I'm just saying, like, you might want to sit right there. But Jesus makes things really simple. I think he makes things really simple, and yet we overcomplicate it. For example, Jesus says, go, and we pause, and we're like, but what do you think Jesus really meant by go, right? I mean, what does the word go really mean? I mean, can we break it down in the Greek? We can, but I don't think you really want to know what it means in the Greek language that it was written in, because it's way worse than you actually think. It's like if we take it as simple as what it says, like it's actually probably a lot simpler than what Jesus actually, the word go in the Greek translation actually means. It means as you go. As you go. Not just like get up, pack a bag, get an airplane ticket, go overseas, like go, somewhere that you're not from, and that's how you go. And that's not what Jesus means. He means as you go. As you go, meaning that as you live your life wherever you are, be engaged in, be part of, do the work of making disciples. Do the work of sharing the good news of the gospel. I think for me growing up, that all nations part, right? It says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. You're like, yeah, but see, you connect that all nations part to the go part, and that means that, like, we're to go, but when we go, like, we don't go here. Like, why would I go in my neighborhood? Like, I need to go to wherever. Like, Brittany's back there. Sorry to call you out, Brittany. Brittany went to Romania. You and your daughter went to Romania, right? Was it Romania? Yeah, they just got back from Romania. We've got a group going to Guatemala later this summer. And those are great and good things. We are to go to those places because we go wherever the Spirit sends us. But the as you go part, first and foremost, means as you go throughout life, as you go throughout your day, as you go throughout work, as you go throughout school, as you go in life, make disciples. We'll talk about the all nations part here in just a second. But it sounds silly, but I was probably a Jesus follower for 10 years before I was taught that this is not what it meant only like to go overseas. And here's really good news, or you might think it's good news or bad news, but every person that is a Christ follower is a missionary and a disciple maker. Charles Spurgeon said, you're either a missionary or you're an imposter. And so you may not be called to go overseas. Some people are. Some people are not. But you are called to go across the street. You are called to go across the hall. You are called to go across the room. You are called as you go. As you go. You're like, come on, man, I don't need anything else to do. Like, I get it. But I didn't write this. God did. So this is the command, and it's given to every Christ follower regardless of maturity. It's like, well, I've been following Jesus for like 5 minutes. You read the Gospels. There are people who just met Jesus, and you know what they did as soon as they met Jesus? They went. Remember the woman at the well? She just meets Jesus for the first time. They're having this conversation. She meets Jesus, and what does she do? She runs right back to her village, and when she runs right back to her village, she goes and she's like, you guys got to come and see. You got to come and see this man who told me everything about me. You got to meet this guy. I got to take you to Jesus. What did she do? She went and she made disciples. She brought people to Jesus. And what did Jesus do? Jesus taught them and he showed them. It says that they stayed with him for days, learning from him, and some followed him. And so you have, this is the command of the commission. We'll talk a little bit more about the command in practical terms next week a little bit, but what's the context of the mission? So here's the context of what Jesus means. He says, of all nations. And so again, it's easy to take that and connect it to the go part and go, of all nations. That means that we don't make disciples necessarily of people here where we are. That's why we go overseas. And yes, that is part of it. That is part of it, but all nations, this means to all people groups, all ethnicities, all types, and all places. The good news of the gospel is for everyone. It's for everyone. No one is exempt. There are no people groups. There are no socioeconomic backgrounds. There are no religious backgrounds. There is no nationality. There is no ethnicity. There is no people, no person, anybody on this planet that is exempt from that. Because it says all nations. And so this means people in Morgan County and people in Moscow. It means people in Clinton, people in Columbia, people in Claxton, people in China, people in Cairns, people in Korea. Like, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All nations. And we are to go. And what are we to do when we go? It says that we are to baptize and teach. Baptizing and teaching. And again, not to overcomplicate this, I think it means to simply help people take their next step in following Jesus. Just like Wesley said a few moments ago. That this is why we exist as a church. This church, we gather together, we do what we do, everything that happens here, whether it's on a Sunday or on a Tuesday or on a Friday, everything that happens here is to help each other, to help you, to help me, for us to help each other, to help the community, all nations, to help them take a next step in following Jesus. So really quickly, let me sort of sparse this out into 4 areas. The phrase make disciples, baptize them, and teach them to observe or to obey gives us, I think, what I see as 4 non-negotiable things every believer is called to do. And the first thing is this, is that we share Jesus. You cannot make disciples of Jesus without sharing Jesus. In fact, Paul says in Romans 10:14, he says, how then can they call on him they have not believed in? How can they believe without hearing about him? And how can they hear without a preacher or a person who goes, right? And how can they preach unless they are sent? So does this mean that we have to start preaching at people, telling them, to turn or burn, get sanctified or chicken fried? Like, is that what we do? I would recommend not. Or maybe you think to yourself, well, I mean, I would, but I just really don't feel like I know the Scripture enough and well enough to do so. Again, I just take you back over and over and over again to everyone who met Jesus and they had this encounter with Jesus. They didn't know, the woman at the well didn't know a lick of Scripture. But what did she do? She went and said, you got to come and see this man who's changed my life. The blind man that was healed by Peter and John in Acts chapter 3, who got up and he ran through the temple. What did he do? He was was Jesus. Like these guys, they spoke in the name of Jesus, and I got up and he walked. And what about the blind guy that Jesus healed? And he went, and they were like, who did this to you? Like, how did this happen? And he was like, listen, I don't know like what happened. Here's all I know. I was blind, but now I see, and it's because of that guy right there. Not a lick of Scripture. Now, does it mean that we don't share Scripture? No, absolutely not. We share Scripture. We can, but I think when Jesus says this, it's assumed that you are sharing the reason for your hope. You're sharing your faith. You're sharing the impact that Jesus has had made on your life with others in order to show others that it's for them as well. That's exactly what these people did. And that's exactly what these disciples will do. And so let me say making disciples is not just sharing your faith. It's part of it, but only part. Because again, look at what Jesus says. He says, baptizing them and teaching them to observe or obey all that I've commanded you. And so following Jesus doesn't end with being saved by Jesus, nor do we just lead people to make decisions. We lead people to be disciples, meaning that you walk with them. You show them. And that's the second thing, is that we have to show Jesus. When people turn from their sin and turn to Jesus, one of the ways that we show Jesus is we take a next step in baptism. We did that last week. 7 or 8 people were baptized last week. A couple of weeks before that, we had 4 or 5 people baptized. We got more baptisms today. So like people just keep taking that next step, and it's amazing. But baptism, it symbolizes our identity with Christ. We are being identified with Christ in the waters of baptism. Because baptism, if you've never been shown this, baptism literally represents the old you standing in the water, being cleansed and repenting of sin, being cleansed from life to death, from death to life. That's baptism. It's showing the impact of Jesus, and you are identifying with the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus through baptism. And so Jesus says, he says, baptize them. So we baptize. And so we need to identify ourselves in baptisms with Jesus. We are identifying, again, with His death, burial, and resurrection, and showing the world that we are not ashamed to be called a Jesus follower. In a world where we are increasingly ashamed to be Jesus followers. And then third, we teach Jesus. We teach Jesus. Jesus, as we go to teach them to observe everything I've commanded. It's what He says. He says, as you go, teach them to observe. Teach them to obey everything I commanded you. In other words, He's saying, teach them all the things that I taught you. I want you to teach them. I want you to show them. And so He's saying, I want you to teach them what I've taught you, and not only teach it to them, but help them to do it. Help them to do it. Help them live it out. And this is how Jesus is multiplied in us. And not every one of us has been gifted by God to teach, like up here standing and preaching and teaching necessarily, but every believer, hear me when I say this, every believer is commanded, boom, right here. It's like, well, I don't think you really meant commanded. Let's see. I think He says, I've commanded you. Yeah, I think He says commanded. And so every believer is commanded to teach. It's like, well, I'm not a preacher. You don't have to be a preacher. What are you teaching? Everything that Jesus has taught you. Everything that Jesus has taught you. And you're teaching it. Not only are you teaching it with the way that you live your life, because that shows Jesus, but you also have to use words. You have to use words sometimes. You have to give a reason for your hope, is what the Scripture says. Anytime that we're given an opportunity. And then the fourth one is that we serve Jesus. Jesus says, make disciples of all nations. Of all nations means, again, to all different people groups. And the good news of the gospel is for everyone. And so, again, that means that as we serve, we find opportunities, like Wesley was talking about a few moments ago in the welcome, is that we have opportunities to just serve. Serve. Listen, when you serve here at the Ridge, whether it doesn't matter what you do. If you're back there in the back who nobody knows who you are, back in the sound booth, or up here on the stage where everybody knows who you are, right? Or down in kids ministry, or on a different night of the week when there might not be as many people here. It does not matter. When you serve each other, you are serving Jesus. Right? Isn't that what Jesus said? He said, when you do this for others, you're doing it for who? Me. And so we serve Jesus. And then lastly, and I'll end with this, there's the covenant of the commission. The covenant of the commission. And the covenant of the commission is lodged between two amazing truths. The first one that Jesus says, he says, all authority has been given to me. That's one. And then the last thing that he says, and I am with you always to the very end of the age. A covenant is a promise. And so he promises these two things. He says, all the authority on heaven and earth is mine. It's been given to me. It's mine. I got this thing. I made the world. I'm controlling the world. I got all of it. Everything holds together by me. It's what Paul says. He's like, I got this thing. All authority. It's all mine. I'm in charge here. And then on the other end, he says, and I'm going to be with you. I'm with you always. And so because of this, listen, because he is in charge, he rules and he reigns. Everything in heaven and everything on earth, every government, every person, he rules and he reigns. All authority has been given to him. And he is with us. And because of this, we have nothing to lose in being obedient to living out the Great Commission in our lives. What do you have to lose if that's true? If that's true. All authority and I am with you always. If those two things are true, what happens right here in the middle? You have nothing to lose. It feels impossible to me to believe that if Jesus has all authority over everything and that his presence is with me in the Holy Spirit, the same power that raised Jesus Christ from the dead lives in me. If I believe those things, it feels impossible to me to be able to say, yes, I believe that all authority in heaven has been given to him. Yes, I believe that he is with me always. If I say that I believe those two things, it feels impossible to me to say that I believe that and then not give my life to fulfilling the Great Commission as part of my life's mission. I don't think a single one of us in here would say to ourselves or say otherwise. You know what? The world is going down the tubes. This world ain't what it used to be. It ain't what it was when I grew up. It's different. And you would be right about that. It is different. And it's changing by the minute. Literally changing by the minute. But I love this. Wesley and Daniel and I were at this conference this past week, and this guy got up, and one of the things that he talked about, one of the things he said, just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, but he said this. He was just talking about, the world is different, it's changed. It's going down the tubes, it's imploding right in front of our very eyes. And it's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about this? And he said this, and it just hit me right here. He said, you know what we're going to do about it? What God told us to do about it. He's like, let this blow your mind. Let this sit in your soul for just a minute. God's big plan to do about this, God's big plan is you. It's you. And it's me. And it's us. We were talking about that this morning in our pre-service meeting, and Noah reminded me, is like, yeah, it's kind of like what Tony Stark said in the Avengers. That's not a good plan. And it doesn't sound like one. It doesn't sound like, because I know me, it doesn't sound like a good plan. But it is the plan, and it's God's plan. And I think He knows a little bit better than we do. I was thinking about that the other day, and I was thinking about this message, and just kind of thinking about, again, we're at this conference, somebody said something, and it just kind of reminded me of this, and I was thinking about, like, man, like, why, what they said was that they talked about, like, you know, as a kid, like all the things that they've done to, you know, just following Jesus, you know, so I started thinking about that too, and just being reminded of the fact that, you know, when I was a 16-year-old kid, like, my pastor came to me and was like, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody to teach at this youth retreat thing that we're going to do, and all your friends are going to be there and stuff, but I think it'd be really cool if maybe you taught them and, you know, opened the Bible and just taught." And I was like, "I've never done that before. But sure, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it," you know. And for the first time ever, I taught. I stood in front of my peers, and we opened the Bible, and so this is what the Bible says. This is what Jesus says, and it was awful, I'm sure. Probably completely and totally incorrect, because I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt this call, and I felt this move to do it. And then at 19 years old, or 18 years old, actually, I was still a senior in high school. I was still going to high school. I was in high school, and you know, pastor called me up, and he was at a new church, at a different church, you know, about 30 minutes away, and he was like, "Hey, you know, I want you to come and teach these students up here." I was like, "I am a student. Like, I don't know, I don't know what I'm doing." He's like, "You figure it out. I'll help. We'll show you." He's like, "Come up here and teach." And so, like, every Wednesday, I'd drive 30, 40 minutes away and go up to this little church and stand in front of 10 kids who thought I was the weirdest person ever. He's like, "Bro, you're like a year older than me. Like, I don't even should listen to you." And I did it for years. Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday night, 30, 40 minutes as an 18-year-old high school kid. And I did that for a couple of years, and I just kept doing it. Like, and for the longest time. And then, like, I was even thinking about, like, this church, when we started this church, this, you know, this being the birthday of our church, but when we started this church, like there was no, like, I wasn't doing it because I was getting paid to do it. I wasn't getting paid to do it. Wasn't getting paid to do it. For years, wasn't getting paid to do it. And I remember the Sunday that we had services, and man, we worked hard. People came in, and we set up chairs, and we set up a stage, and we brought this band in, and everything that we owned was in this tiny, like, 10 by 10 trailer. Everything that we owned as a church fit inside this trailer. All the kids ministry stuff, the sound system, like everything that we owned. And we'd drag all that stuff out, and we'd set it all up, and we'd pray, and we'd ask for God to do something, for God to show up. And I remember one Sunday we were doing this, and this is about 3 or 4 months into after we had launched our church, and we had church, and there was one person that showed up to church that day. One. And you're like, I mean, seriously, there was probably more than one. No, I'm not joking. Right back there where Steve and Rhonda are sitting, there was, not in this room, because we weren't in this room, we were over at the Doubletree Hotel, but they were sitting right back there, and they'd never been to our church before. And guess what? They probably had never been back either, because they were like the only person in the room. The only, besides the band. And me. And I got up and I preached to that one person. And I'm pretty sure I blacked out. I don't remember what I preached, and it was probably really, really bad. It's like, why do all that? Like, why drive 40 minutes away when you're a high school kid? Like, you could be doing other things. You could be playing sports, and you could be hanging out with girls, be hanging out with your friends. Like, you could be doing other things. Why do that? Why set up chairs and take down chairs and spend your whole Sunday? I don't mean like half the day. I mean the whole Sunday. Like, we're showing up at 6 a.m. We're not leaving until like 1:30. Why do that? Because I believe this. Because I believe this. I believe what Jesus said is true. I believe that he said that we are to go and make disciples. And that could be standing on a stage and preaching and teaching. That could be playing an instrument. That could be pushing buttons back there. That could be teaching kids. That could be teaching students. That could be serving coffee. That could be greeting and saying hello and helping cars park. I believe it all matters. I believe this because Jesus is real and he changed my life. And I hope that you believe that too. But if you do believe it, this is where I'll close. If you do believe it, I hope that you'll give your life to it. I hope that you'll give your life to it. And even if you're sitting there and you're like, I don't even know how. Ask. We can help. We can help. We can show. We can teach. We can help. We can give you opportunities. Or maybe you're not a believer and you're not even a Christ follower and you're like, man, I ain't giving up my Sunday like that. Or my Wednesday, or whatever. Here's the thing I would say to you. Is these disciples, when Jesus told them to go and make disciples, you know how we know that they believed that and knew for a fact that Jesus raised from the dead? That he was alive? It was because they actually went and did what Jesus said. And they didn't just lose some opportunities. They didn't just lose some salary. They didn't just lose out on some promotion. They didn't just miss some soccer games or some basketball games or softball games or whatever. Like they just didn't miss a few things. They just didn't have a few things happen for them that could have happened otherwise. And then they died. Not because they got old, because somebody said, you better tell everybody around here that you don't believe what you say that you believe and what you've been preaching about and teaching about. You better tell everybody that it's false. Can't do it. Kill them. We cannot help but talk about what we have seen and what we have heard. Let's pray. Father, would you help us to understand? God, would you help us and give us the courage to believe and the courage to step out, Father? God, to hold to the truth that all authority has been given to you and that you are with us until the very end of the age, meaning that you are with us always. God, you're even in your name means God with us. You are with us. And so, Father, remind us on a daily basis, God, that we have nothing to lose. We have nothing to fear. And so swell our hearts with courage, God, to follow you, to be led by you, to share you, and to show you, God, and to go and to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them to observe all that you have commanded us. God, with our lives, as we go to lunch today, as we go and do whatever it is that we're going to do later this afternoon or this week, as we go, God, let it be a reminder to us. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. We just invite you to come and take communion when you're ready as you just consider and pray through responding the body of Christ and the blood of Christ, the cracker and the juice that reminds us that Jesus died, that he died on a cross, body broken, blood poured out, to bring us into relationship with God, to pay the debt and the payment of our sin, to bring us to God. And then he resurrected from the grave to prove that he is who he said he is. And so every time we take communion, we do it in remembrance of him, to be reminded of these things. And so it's available in the very back there. It's available right here. So would you stand to your feet as you respond? And I just ask you to keep praying if you need to pray. Keep asking of the Lord and then to worship and take communion when you're ready.